Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Now, before you do anything, I am going to ask that you subscribe so you can see more videos like this when they come out, especially if you turn on notifications. But about 6 months ago, um, on the dot, it's more like five, but who cares? Donald Trump was able to win in quite the mandate. He won every swing state when quite a few of them were considered looking pretty good for Harris. Namely Michigan, Wisconsin were widely favored to go to her. Besides for this channel specifically, um, and some other channels like On Point Politics, we had them going to Trump by 7. So pretty small margin of error for me there. But Trump won not just the popular vote, not just the swing states. He won every county he won in 2020. Pretty big, a pretty big defiance of normal trends where even Biden lost counties that Hillary Clinton won. Even Obama lost counties that John Kerry won. Like, for the most part, each side flips counties. There's 3,000 of them. Kamala Harris flipped a none. Um, Donald Trump was able to make states like New Jersey, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine, Minnesota much closer than expected for Democrats, along with New York. They shored up Republican margins in Texas, Florida, Ohio, and Iowa, which to the point where obviously the key 7 swing states for Democrats. But after that, the next potential win for Democrats is a Trump plus 12 state. You can also include Maine second, but I wouldn't completely, since it's not a state. But it seems about 5 months from then, Trump's mandate is put into jeopardy. You did have a pretty crucial seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court go to the liberal candidate by 10%. A pretty big upset of pre-election polling and some of the fundamentals that I used. I was wrong there. I didn't have the Republican winning, but I was off in the margin by about 5%. So my bad. But you have seen Trump's approval decline. The generic ballot, well, not great for Democrats. It does show a Democratic lead in generic ballot polls, and you are seeing Democrats overperforming in some special elections. So it begs the question: what would happen in 2026 and 2025 if it was a pretty big Democratic landslide? Now, I'm not going to say like a D plus 15 generic vote, but I'd say the baseline is perhaps D plus 8, around what 2018 was. It's not the best Senate map for Democrats at this point, which is why I'll also be including the gubernatorial map. If you want a House prediction, I mean, it's mostly which seats do Democrats flip because they're going to flip the House. And in a blue wave, they're just going to flip the House by more. It's as simple as that. But it could be interesting to see what seats differ from 2018 and 2026 if I were to do that. So subscribe if you want to see more videos like that below. We're very close to 2,100 subscribers, which would be big. It'd be big. It's a big number. It's a big number, and the average people who try to troll me under this YouTube video, oh, Democrats are going to win Oklahoma because LTE said so. Yeah, there's a reason you got 2 subscribers. Anyways, even though I joke about it, I'm very thankful for the support. But let's get into this. So in a blue wave, I'd say you'd probably actually we'll start with Democrat states just to be favorable to them. They're probably going to help. Most of their incumbents are going to hold on quite easily. Obviously, you got the safe states. Um, for Democrats. I also think Virginia, you got a pretty strong Democratic incumbent in there, in Mark Warner, and Harris even won this state by quite the margin. So I think they ended up winning that by a safe margin. New Hampshire, I mean, the ideal Democrat scenario is that Chris Sununu doesn't run. Pappas is a pretty phenomenal candidate. Republicans run a no name. They probably won't. It's probably gonna be Scott Brown if Chris Sununu doesn't run. But we'll say they run like a Don Bolduc type again, and he ends up losing by 10%. You also have Colorado, New Mexico end up safe Democrat. Michigan, Minnesota, and Georgia are less than safe. I mean, I suppose Minnesota maybe. Republicans have some potentially bad nominees. It was a Harris plus 4 state, and you have Angie Craig as a potential nominee for Democrats, who's a pretty strong candidate. So probably safe Democrats. The Democrats already have a floor of 45 Senate seats, while Republicans, I mean, they win some of these safe seats. Nebraska, we're going to assume Dan Osborne runs. Um, they win some of these safe seats, but they don't win them by that much. Um, yeah, I'd say if it goes terribly for Republicans, these are the safe seats, which weirdly enough has Democrats ahead by 3 Senate seats, which potentially puts them in the gunning for control of the chamber. I think is a bit messy there, but we'll see. As for likely Democrat, Michigan, you know, potentially you don't get the greatest Republican nominee. Obviously, Tudor Dixon is someone you could choose, but also just the Republican nominee who doesn't get rural turnout up. And Democrats have okay candidates in Michigan. I think State Senator Michelle McMorrow could be kind of good. I haven't heard that much about her, but Democrats put up an okay candidate who can juice turnout in the Detroit metropolitan area, and Republican turnout in the rural areas falls, or even some of those counties end up shifting to Democrats a little bit. Um, you also end up having North Carolina. This could happen. Actually, Michelle McMorrow. Actually, I think is a North. I'm stupid. I can actually see here. But North Carolina, obviously, I don't think Mark Robinson makes it past the primary, but you could assume, Tillis goes down in a primary to some idiot that Republicans are on. One here, superintendent. This was actually a Democrat flip where the incumbent was primaried by, I forget her name, but her name was Morrow. New York Times says that. But you could assume that perhaps the Republicans primarying the incumbent, or Tillis is just a bad enough candidate, and Roy Cooper wins by enough to knock him off by like maybe 5 to 6%. Um, Maine, you could also assume that Jared Golden runs and flips the Senate seat. I mean, it is a Harris plus 7 state, and if Susan Collins isn't that popular and the national wave gets to her, I could see her losing by like 6% in a worst case scenario. But that's kind of it for Democrats. And I'd say for likely Republican, one, you have Kansas and Montana. These are kind of, um, I mean, they're the most competitive out of these rural states. I don't think they drag out Tester to run again in Montana, but Bullock did okay um, against, forget his name, um, the Montana senator who's not she, he. Uh, Well, his name has completely blanked my mind. But you could say like the bit of a wave for Democrats knocks his margin of victory down 10%. Abortion definitely is a big issue in Montana, and it's more of a libertarian state, so you could potentially see that happen. Um, where Republican margins in these rural areas goes down a little bit. Some of the suburbs like Cascade, Lewis and Clark being the big one, end up shifting away from them. And you could see a maybe not a performance similar to Tester's on the same ballot because Tester, he had phenomenal appeal to the native reservations, the Indians. I don't think he'd have any Democratic nominee with such an appeal, but you could potentially see a Democrat, slightly underperform him, run more in line with Bullock's 2020 performance. Kansas also have a relatively fine Republican incumbent, but it is a even albeit at a snail's pace, left trending state. Um, I think you could definitely see a Democrat do better in the Topeka, Kansas City metropolitan area, run it up more in these blue counties, potentially even do better in the Wichita area. Um, Sedgwick County is a bellwether, and if that narrows because Wichita becomes more Democrat, it could potentially jeopardize Republicans statewide. I still don't think it would flip, but it would be closer than expected. Um, Florida also, I think, would be likely. No, I don't want to leave. Florida could be likely. Uh, it does look like the new incumbent Ashley Moody, I think is her name. Um, yes, Ashley Moody could. I mean, she's going to be an overperformer, but it could get kind of close. If you have a regionalized wave, um, you did see in 2018 a lot of these suburban, not really suburban, but kind of suburban Miami, um, with a lot of Hispanics in the South, swing Democrat, Republicans lost two incumbents there. You could potentially see, even with Hispanic trends remaining stagnant, Democratic turnout in Broward and Orange go up, in places like Jacksonville, Pinellas, Hillsborough end up flipping back to Democrats, which potentially could make the state under 10%. Same thing with South Carolina. Lindsey Graham is a bad incumbent for Republicans, and even though it was a Trumpless 18 state, I feel like he lacks appeal to the new Trump coalition. If Democrats spend against him like they did in 2020, I could see it narrowly being under 10%. Um, and Alaska, I mean, even if Mary Peltola runs, Dan Sullivan out of Alaska is a good enough incumbent. Um, you also do have it. It's a Trumpless 14 state, so I really don't see it being that close. But potentially in a wave, it could be kind of close. So yeah, a lot of the previous Democrat lead has narrowed with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 likely states to 1, 2, 3. Well, I will say 2 of these are against incumbents, so it's definitely not anything to laugh at for Democrats. And Democrats, I think they'll get one more lean state, Georgia. I could potentially see Ossoff winning by more. I just don't think he's as good of a candidate as Roy Cooper, which kind of makes up for this fact that these states are relatively close in margin. North Carolina usually is 1 point to the right of Georgia, which doesn't bode well for the future. But I think that Ossoff isn't the strongest candidate, even if it's a blue wave. He really only won in a fluke in 2020, so I think he'd be reelected. He'd be reelected by like 4%, but not nearly as enough as or not nearly as much as Roy Cooper could potentially win by in North Carolina. So you'd see this be like maybe a. I mean, I don't want to say anything too close, but maybe like a 4 to 5 point Democratic margin. Um, I'd say actually that's probably it for the leaning Democrat states. I think leaning Republican. The first one would be Ohio. John Husted is a pretty strong Republican nominee, but one you could see some coattail, not really reverse coattails, since I would say that governor and senator are about equal, like president and governor. But you could see some coattails from the governorship drag down Republicans here, especially since it's pretty widely agreed that Ramaswamy is the weaker nominee than Husted. And Husted really isn't that battle tested in a competitive Ohio race. I could definitely see it getting kind of bad for him, especially if you have a national wave to put it in perspective. You had on the Ohio ballot their incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown lose re-election. This was kind of obvious. People pretended that it wasn't going to happen. This is like the most obvious thing since John Tester losing re-election. Okay, there's a dog screaming in my ear. But people pretended that it wasn't going to happen. It did. Okay, the dog is like trying to kill someone. But what the hell do you want? Okay. But you did see this race was D plus 7 in 2018, so it shows that Ohio can be affected by some of those waves. Democrats also have some good challengers. Obviously, have Sherrod Brown or Tim Ryan who could pull from. But even if not, if Marcy Kaptur or Amelia Sykes are drawn out, they could run for governor, but they could also run for Senate. Put up a decent fight against John Husted. I think you also see Texas. Paxton, he's a fine nominee. I think mostly the reason why this is a lean Republican and not like tilt or a Democrat flip is because one, Texas is one of the most right trending states in the country. People have not come to terms with this. People still think that Texas is predispositioned to become a safe Democrat state. No, there's nothing that indicates that. I think Paxton would definitely lose a few of the suburban voters that ended up voting for Trump. And Democrats have an okay potential nominee for Senate. In Colin already retired in 2024 to take on Ted Cruz. He overperformed the top of the ticket, but that's also kind of Cruz's personal unlikability. But he did do okay in the suburbs, which is something to keep in mind. I think these Hispanic numbers, honestly, would only go down from here. I can really only see him doing worse than here. You don't have the top ticket on the same ballot, but also down ballot lag in Texas is kind of a bitch for Republicans. And you could eventually you would see Allred lose a lot of his Hispanic appeal here and in the urban areas. And Paxton, he's not the best nominee. He wouldn't hold up great in the suburbs, but he would hold up okay in the rural areas. And places like inner city Dallas, Tarrant, Houston. So I think it'd be lead Republican with him as the nominee. And I also would say that Nebraska, even with Osborne as the nominee, he did pretty good. out of the Nebraska Senate election in 2024. He held up relatively well in the suburbs of Douglas and Lancaster. Obviously, the rest of the state swung for him more. Um, it's actually something interesting. Um, Boyd County was more lopsided on the Senate ballot. It was also like much closer here. That's kind of weird. But other than that, he did mostly better in these rural areas than the other slate of Democrats. He probably is running again. Um, and I think he could potentially give Ricketts a fight, run for his money. Ricketts is a stronger nominee than Fisher, I will say. I think he could run a general election campaign better. And Dan Osborne running again, um, it really it wouldn't work out for him. Him being seen as a perennial candidate, like, oh yes, I'm going to take on another billionaire who shares the same generic talking point attributes as Deb Fisher. Oh wait, it's as if I'm the one making that up. I mean, Fisher's not the best candidate, but like at some point, Osborne's messaging, if I could have spit it out properly, it probably isn't going to work when he's just going to use the same attacks, except on Pete Ricketts. Oh my God, another billionaire! Wow! Donate to me at actblue.com. Like it could make it closer, but it's becoming kind of obvious he's a grifter. And while I don't think that instantaneously tanks his campaign, I just think a lot of these rural counties um, that were, maybe closer than like the presidential election or the other Senate election. I just think he's going to lose a lot of appeal there, which means Republicans end up holding the Senate. While we have Iowa, um, this is a hard one because Joni Ernst isn't the best nominee. She underperformed Trump by like two in 2020 when they shared a ballot. I definitely I could see her underperforming. I think in this scenario she underperforms. It's the only tilt state here. I just don't know if she underperforms enough to lose. I think Iowa, a lot of the Republican margin is buoyed by these rural areas and like these kind of working class urban areas. And I think if she does better in these urban areas, like Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and you know, or if the Democratic challenger does better in Davenport, Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, these blue areas, and flip some of these red counties like Dallas, um, Winneshiek, Jefferson. I mean, there's not too many other Dubuque. I don't know. Hawkeye is going to bully me for mispronouncing that, but like, if you can do better in some of these rural areas, flip a few counties. She did end up losing Saragüedo County in 2020. I remember that. Which, if she has a similar lack of appeal to these rural areas, the areas that swung for Trump, I could see it being competitive. I think in this prediction, just because it's a blue wave, we're gonna have it narrowly flipping Democrats. Could put up a good nominee. The guy who ran against Steve King in 2018 and nearly knocked him off in like a Trump plus 20 seat, though that was because Steve King was a Nazi. Um, I think it could potentially end up flipping Democrat, though even that's a big if, and there's really no other path. Like, there's no obvious path for Democrats in the Senate. If they're even if they're able to win Iowa, Nebraska, Texas, and Ohio probably are quite safely Republican. But the reason I'm using the gubernatorial map as well is I can't speak is because I think it'll be much better for Democrats. There's many more Democratic flip opportunities here. Than in the Senate map by virtue of one, not as many or more states being up, um, not as many states being up in different years, and two, potentially these races could swing much more than the Senate races. The Senate races are more polarized because of the presidential election that kind of worked in Democrats' favor, not really the Senate, but the House in 2018. And the gubernatorial races, I mean, they did a little bit worse than the House. They did better than the Senate, where they lost seats. But I think it could work in their favor this time around, especially if some safe Republican states are in jeopardy. So I think we'll start off with the safe Democrat states. Most of the seats they hold will be safe Democrat. Ooh, it's in disable mode. That's why. Most of the seats that they hold will be in safe Democrat. Um, I don't think you can really argue with here. New York, I'm assuming Republicans don't get a competent nominee. While local perhaps underperforms the 2024 ballot. I think she doesn't underperform by enough to make it a likely or lean Democrat state. Maryland, Virginia, it does look like Spanberger is doing very well. And that Winsome Sears campaign is crashing and burning. I assume Democrats do better in like the Richmond suburbs. Rural turnout goes down, especially in these heavily heavily Republican counties. And you do see the suburbs revolt against Trump a little bit. So I'd say safe Democrat. Oh, I forgot Vermont. I mean, if you want to do a wave, Phil Scott retires. I don't think he's going to retire though. I think we're gonna assume he runs for re-election, and like even his 2018 performance when he was less of a strong candidate was over 10%. I think he wins quite wrong color. I think he wins quite easily. Freudian slip. Um, but in Maine they got a pretty good nominee in Jared Golden Navy. Though I am kind of assuming he runs for Senate. Uh, but if they don't get Jerry Golden, the way the wave is going, they're going to win that easily. In this prediction, like a D+8 environment, they should win Maine governor easily. So that's safe. And New Jersey, I'm assuming that here, even if Citarelli's the nominee, he's been the nominee twice. Um, Kind of the same thing that happens to Osborne ends up happening to him. Um, Even though I do think he potentially could do better than Osborne, because the state is right trending. We're assuming that the suburbs revolt against Republicans, and even if you do have some right trending precincts in like Passaic, Bergen, Hudson, Essex, the suburbs completely collapsing for Republicans makes it safe Democrats. Same thing with Pennsylvania. Shapiro's vastly popular. I'd say Hawaii, obviously. I'd say this is it for the safe Democrat states. Safe Republican, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, the new Republican governor who took over after Kristi Noem resigned. Did you know that? South Dakota has a new governor. I knew that. I don't even know his name though. He's that irrelevant. Um, you have those be safe. Republican, Oklahoma, Oklahoma could be close actually. We'll leave it one off. Nebraska, without Dan Osborne running for governor, there you really don't have a nominee there. Like Nebraska Senate, the the reason Osborne was able to become the nominee was because Democrats just forgot to run a candidate against him. Um, then they co-opted him and made him into a Democrat. But like Preston Love, who is Preston Love? I don't know who Preston Love is. Here, like Carol Blood was the former gubernatorial nominee, and she ran for Nebraska's first and got crushed. Like Democrats just do not have nominees for any of these races. Like they just recycle the same politicians who are willing to get crushed each time. Um, so they don't have a nominee there. They won't get that too close. Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina. It really depends. I think Nancy Mace is a bad candidate. I think she would underperform a little bit just because like she doesn't have that much appeal outside of District 1, and she looks like she's gunning for governor. I don't think she underperforms as much as a Graham would. You would have a lot of money spending against her because like the one good thing she insults transgenders. People are like, oh my god, she's so terrible for that. Like, no, I've been saying she's terrible because she sucks on the issues for so long. Um, but you could see some money flood into state because of that. But if it does, Democrats are going to be running a tranny. And they're not exactly the best candidates when that's their entire policy platform. Vermont probably safe Republican, though I think we'll hold off on New Hampshire for now. You did see it get a bit closer in 2018, though Republicans still won. Not going to spoil any of the video though, so we're going to move on from New Hampshire. We're moving on. We're moving on. Likely Democrat. I'm assuming Wisconsin. Wisconsin doesn't seem to be the best state for Republicans. The fact that it voted to the left of Michigan was a pretty bad sign. And with the Supreme Court race, I just it looks like it's ticking time bomb in the suburbs. Especially Tony Evers' third reelection coalition will do much better in the suburbs. He didn't do good there in 2018 because he was running against an incumbent, and also that incumbent was named Scott Walker. He got like some of the strongest margins in Waukesha, Zaki, and Washington for a Republican. Like you were running against someone very special there. You're not gonna have another Scott Walker type candidate for a while. Um, so he did better in his 2022 reelection here. I think he does better again, especially in this scenario. He's winning by a high likely margin, by the way, in this scenario. Not quite 10%. If Crawford couldn't win by 10%, which he She won by like 10.05%. But if she couldn't win by over 10%, I don't think Tony Evers can. Um, he also does better in some of these more Republican suburban counties like Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago. He probably flips Winnebago. Uh, Potentially could flip Brown. Outagamie is a 50-50. And he also does better in these rural areas. Maybe not better than 2022, but he at least holds his performance. Like wins Vernon and Crawford County, which is pretty much all you have to do as a Democrat to win big statewide. If you're able to make that, if you're able to win Vernon, one of Richland and Crawford, you're reducing Republicans' margins in the rural areas enough that you can win in a landslide statewide. And you see places like Madison, Milwaukee pick up a lot for Democrats. So I think he ends up winning by like 8 to 10%. Um, uh, Arizona. I mean, you could see Biggs run a bad campaign. I'm not sure if it could end up likely Democrat. I mean, if Biggs runs a bad campaign and is dragged down, kind of like a Tudor Dixon, I don't think so because he's an elected representative. Like Doug Mastriano was a state senator, but even so, he's a representative. He's outperformed in most of his congressional runs. I still think if Hobbs runs a good campaign, and you see the suburbs invert a lot um, from 2020 and 2024, where they were like kind of Republican. If you see them go pretty vastly Democrat, you could see that become likely Democrat. I mean, Michigan as well. If Republicans don't put up a good nominee there, the independent takes a lot of Republican votes. You can see the margin in these rural areas become reduced. And Democrats, even though they don't do as good in Wayne, Washington, and Oakland, most prominent Democrats are running for governor, and you also have some better recruits running for governor in that case. So I think you see it end up around likely Democrat, much closer than Wisconsin, which is a high likely margin. This is a lower likely margin, but still Democrat all the same. Um, you also see Republicans. I mean, Oklahoma's one. This was a heavily Trump state, but you also do have the stand on the Oklahoma GOP that is Kevin Stitt. He could potentially drag down his predecessor. And you do have areas like Oklahoma City, Cleveland, and Tulsa, which have voted for Democrats in the past. 2022, they voted for Democrat for governor. And you could potentially see it get closer, especially if Ryan Walters is the nominee. I love Ryan Walters. He's not the best nominee for a statewide election in Oklahoma. You wouldn't see it flip. You could see it get to like a 6 to 7 point margin for Republicans, but that's already a win enough in Oklahoma. It means that you're probably winning one of the congressional districts, and if you're doing well enough, could potentially win some state legislative seats and make it uncomfortably close for one of the Republican House incumbents. Um, I think you also see Kansas end up likely Republican. I mean, excluding Sharice Davids running for the Kansas governor seat, which I mean, to her credit, would make it a lean margin, but also it'd be the end of her career. Uh, she did okay in the suburban areas. I mean, this wasn't the best. This was drawn as like a kind of gerrymander for Republicans. I mean, I could draw better. Um, and I'm a guy on the internet with a computer. You just split Johnson County, or you don't put Wyandotte County in it. I don't know why. I don't know why you felt the need to put Wyandotte in it, but geniuses. But problem is, I just I don't see it being too competitive. Besides for Laura Kelly, really no one has been able to keep these Democratic margins in the urban counties while narrowing the Republican margins a lot in the rural areas. I just don't think you find a candidate who will do that again. So I think it ends up like a 6 to 7 point margin for Republicans. Out of Texas, Abbott seems pretty much guaranteed to be the nominee again. And while he wouldn't do as bad as Paxton, I still think he could potentially do bad. If he's not able to run up the rural areas with the suburbs shifting against Republicans, like Harris, Fort Bend, Travis, Hayes, they are Tarrant, Dallas, Colin Denton, even return to their 2020 margins, and you see Republican turnout go down in the rural areas, it could get ugly. Especially with Hispanics, even go to their 2022 margins. So you get 2020 margins out of the urban areas, you know, 2022 margins out of the Hispanic areas. You could have a bad time as a Republican. I still don't think it would end up flipping, but Abbott, he's a strong incumbent, but even so, if you're having enough of a wave, it could drag him down a little bit. Um, Florida as well, short of Matt Gaetz being the gubernatorial nominee, it's definitely going to be a hard win for Democrats, but Byron Donalds, he's a pretty good nominee, but you could once again see him underperform in some suburban areas. Democratic turnout be a little bit higher. The Republican margins in some of these rural areas go a little bit down. And I will say, elderly voters have begun to shift to the Democratic Party, so you could potentially see that hurt Republican margins in these rural areas, like, I don't know, the villages. Um, but for the most part, I think it's going to be a tough win for Democrats. So I think I'm pretty confident saying it's likely Republican as of now, which means that the states that are going to be under 5% are these. If I'm not mistaken, Democrats have already held all their incumbents and flipped Virginia, so Democrats are slated to make gains in the remaining states. We start off with Georgia. Even though Lucy McBath turned down seeking the governorship, which probably isn't the best sign, though I will say potentially it could be her husband's cancer, but also it could be she's jumping ship on a party that's probably not going to do that great in the midterms. Uh, Potentially it could be a main Senate type of thing where I think that a lot of Democrats are bowing out going for that Senate election. Uh, Not for like, oh, Susan Collins is secretly favored to win by 10, just because they're stupid. Like, you don't want to pretend that your opponents are genius when they're not genius. You want to assume that they have basic levels of competency, but potentially there's no story to it. Just Democrats are stupid and they don't realize that it's a pretty big opportunity for them to win. I think that Georgia, if you're able to see black turnout go up, which it looks like the former mayor of Atlanta will be Democrats candidate. Uh, I mean, maybe, but she's not the best candidate. But you could see her do better amongst black voters. You know, partially because it's a midterm, partially because she has a turnout edge. You know, stop the bleeding among black voters. Do a lot better in the suburbs, cut Republicans' margins down. The rural areas because of turnout, midterm, etc. You could potentially see it be a lean Democrat state, which is Democrats' second gain. Um, Alaska as well. Potentially, Republicans put up a bad nominee against Mary Peltola, who's likely to be the Democrat nominee. Potentially, she runs a better campaign than 2024. She emphasizes the local ties. She doesn't get dragged down by a presidential election at the top of the ticket. She ends up winning by like 2 to 3%. Um, I mean, oh, I guess Ohio at this point. Ohio see Vivek Ramaswamy underperform Trump a lot in these rural areas. Um, his policies aren't exactly that Trumpian, and also running an Indian for governor of Ohio, not the best idea. Like Democrat runs it up in places like Cleveland, Hamilton, Franklin, a lot more. In the midterm, pushes some of these suburban counties, like Summit, the Cincinnati suburbs, even some of the Columbus suburbs, away from Republicans. You could see be a low lean margin for Democrats, like 2 to 3%. Though I think any higher than that would be pretty hard. Leaning Republican, I mean, I think the first one is New Hampshire governor, even though it's kind of counterintuitive that New Hampshire is leading Republican. I just think Kelly Ayotte's a strong enough nominee. Kamala Harris won the state by more than 2%, and Kelly Ayotte won the state by more than 9%. Like, she's a pretty big overperformer. Now she has incumbency. I mean, Democrats could potentially put up someone who could, run up a bit more in Manchester, Nashua, the Dover area. It's just, I think she'll get good enough margins among these ex-urban counties. They're kind of Trumpian, but also essentially Republican enough. That she's probably gonna, run it up in Salem. She's not gonna lose Salem, and she's gonna win that by quite a lot. The Salem area, some of these rural counties, some of these counties, some not counties, some of these rural townships, the townships in Coos County, like she's gonna do good there. I think she'll do well enough in places like Coos, Belknap, Rockingham, Hillsborough. Actually, I can show the county map for this. Was quite a deafening blow to Democrats. That, like, even if Democrats do better in places like Merrimack, Grafton, Cheshire, Stratford, I don't think it'll be enough. I think she'll hold on. Which leaves us with two tilt states. The first tilt state, Nevada. I mean, Joe Lombardo's a pretty popular incumbent, and it's a pretty heavily Trump state. It would be hard to knock him off. You do have Aaron Ford, the Democrat Attorney General, if I'm not mistaken. Who is probably going to be the nominee. He's a pretty strong candidate. He won by quite a bit in 2022. I just think Joe Lombardo's approvals are too high. Um, it's also a Republican trending state. Even if there's a midterm blowback, I don't think it's enough to, especially since Joe Lombardo is the former sheriff of Clark County, make Clark County blue enough, or make Washoe County blue enough. for Democrats to win this. So I'd say it's narrowly tilt Republican. As of now, Democrats could run a better campaign on Nevada, but I will compensate for that by giving Democrats Iowa. Uh, Kim Reynolds is a pretty unpopular incumbent, and Iowa, it's not exactly built for off years. I do think Kim Reynolds won in 2022 partially because, you know, the Republican coalition, even though it's not built for off years, was able to run it up in the rural areas enough because of the wave. And she did really good in the suburban areas. She's not exactly popular now. While part of that is her DeSantis endorsement, that could also hurt among Republicans. And if she doesn't improve that, she's not gonna have a great time winning re-election. I do have it as tilt Democrat for Senate. I think just because of the wave. And this is a 2018 style environment. I think that carries over to governor, and I think she also loses by a pretty narrow margin. So these are the two best case scenario for Democrats. I can't wait for someone to screenshot these out of context. Be like, "Whoa! Even Tester is done. Has Iowa governor flipping to Democrats? It's over. Democrats are flipping South Dakota. Whoa! Even Tester is done. Has Maine as likely Democrat? It's over. Democrats are flipping Kansas. Like, whoa! Wow, you don't understand the concept of the video. But the main point of this is one, things can go badly for Republicans, especially on the gubernatorial level, if we have a 2018 style environment. And two, Democrats flipping the Senate is a great saying from the glorious leader of this channel. Democrats on the Senate are up shit's creek. No, okay, I'm just fucking retarded because I I was gonna say up shit's creek without a paddle. That's the normal quote. The joke is up shit's paddle without a creek. I'm fucking retarded. Thank you for watching. It's been an honor having you on this channel for this video. I hope it's less schizophrenic than the rest. But anyway, subscribe if you are new, become a member, like, comment, share with your friends. If you're an Indian scammer, share it with all of your victims. I don't mind as long as they watch the video and subscribe and comment down below. Well, actually, in the best case scenario for the Democrats, Minnesota governor would end up flipping Republican. Yes, true. We will rig it from Democrats. The best case scenario is actually, you know what? We're gonna do a little bit of a troll. You take the screenshots now. We're gonna send a map actually because Project 2025. All Democratic voters will be put in um summer camps, and actually the Senate map will end up as this. This is the Democrats' best case scenario. Yeah, it's looking pretty bad for you guys. And then I'll go here and I'll flash through them on screen. But anyways, thank you for watching. This was a fun video to make. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe if you are new. Share with your friends. Actually, we'll be annoying. We'll make Wisconsin tilt Democrat. We'll have Minnesota and Michigan as safe. Make sure to share with your friends so that they can experience the glory of Tester's done. Massachusetts is probably lean Republican, and we'll give Democrats Maryland by 1%. Yeah, make sure to like the video, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Tester's done. Out.